Star Wars returns to the big screen after several years away. Is it a triumph or tragedy? Find out when Johnnie Torch reviews The Mandalorian and Grogu. Well, welcome back to another Johnnie Torch review. Today we're taking on The Mandalorian and Grogu. This is the long-awaited, I guess by some, return to the big screen of Star Wars. And we're going to talk about all of that, plus the movie, hopefully, here on the Johnnie Torch review. Please make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe. Okay, so a lot of this has been controversial. Disney pretty much destroyed the Star Wars brand. We all know it. The sequel trilogy was a disaster. We had a lot of Disney Plus series that were soundly panned, such as The Acolyte. But for one brief shining moment at the beginning of all this, we had some hope. We had a little hope for a few things, and one of them was The Mandalorian, which was a show that sort of got the fledgling Disney Plus network streaming service, whatever you call them, out the gate. And it had strong reviews. A lot of people liked it. It was a lot of fun. It was sort of a fun throwback to the serial adventure style that Star Wars was known for under George Lucas. And also the the Clone Wars style structure, of self-contained adventure. And of course, that ran into a lot of complications. There was the Gino Carano incident, which soured a lot of people on the show. I personally did not abandon the show because of that, but of course, that was an unfortunate thing. We had also the fever pitch of Luke Skywalker showing up at the end of season 2 to take baby Grogu, and a hastily conceived ending of that storyline in the book of Boba Fett, where Grogu decides to eschew any Jedi training with Luke and return to the Mandalorian. Flash forward after the book of Boba Fett, we had the third season of The Mandalorian. The Mandalorian, it faced some scrutiny. A lot of people didn't like the third season. I thought it was all right. It wasn't very ambitious for the character of Din Djarin, but it did settle a lot of problems that were going on, that he had to sort of rededicate himself to the Mandalorian ways since his face was seen by outsiders. I didn't mind the storyline mostly being influenced by Bo-Katan and the ending of sort of that storyline of hers, which brought us, a lot more of Mandalorians. I mean, the show is called The Mandalorian, but it still dealt in the Mandalorians, plural. So I didn't really have a problem with that. I don't know why so many people did, but apparently they did. And so on the graph, the popularity of The Mandalorian is sort of waning. So my concern for this movie was perhaps its best days were behind it, and it was not going to be popular enough to spark the interest of Star Wars viewers who are jaded at this point. And we'll get into that a little more in a second. Of course, Baby Yoda / AKA Grogu is still a big draw for toys and plushies and this and that. So it seems like the safe bet to get Star Wars back on the big screen with an established hit. Of course, the last Star Wars movie was Rise of Skywalker, which was polarizing, and a lot of people didn't like it, myself included. A lot of us didn't like the sequel trilogy to begin with. Solo, of course, being the biggest box office flop Star Wars ever had. I didn't hate it, but, grading on the curve, it was okay. But basically, up until now, the Disney Star Wars only had one legitimate good movie, which was Rogue One, until they made the TV series, which was very overrated, and that would cause me to digress if I went into that. But I did like Rogue One, the actual movie, and so to get a sort of soft return to the big screen, it was a smart idea to get the Mandalorian and Grogu their own movie, and it's characters everybody already knows and loves. It's not going to be that ambitious a project. It's basically taking up where the last season of The Mandalorian took off. Um, Before we get into spoilers, just some general thoughts. Um, I went into this movie because, like, again, there was a lot of controversy. A lot of people just are with guns blazing in rage of Disney Star Wars. Now, of course, there's nothing wrong with being disappointed with Disney Star Wars. I think there's a lot to be disappointed in. The sequel trilogy was a disaster. The Acolyte was horrible. There were other minor successes, such as The Mandalorian, such as Rogue One. I didn't like Andor, although a lot of people did. And of course, Kenobi, which I still say, not to digress and get all into that, but it was actually very good, but it was handled by the B team, a team of people that really didn't give it the love and appreciation it needed, which was unfortunately given to Andor, which they made that a 5-star production quality wise, if not content wise. Kenobi seemed like had the B team putting it together. And one would think if they didn't get cold feet on Star Wars movies, honestly, the Kenobi movie was the only real shoe-in that they had to bring Star Wars fans to the big screen. You had the prequel kids that grew up with Ewan and Hayden wanting to see them on the big screen again. You'd have the jaded Gen Xers would still go and check it out just to see Obi-Wan and Vader again. But unfortunately, again, that was treated as a sort of a B movie, a B series. It really didn't get quite the emphasis it needed. It also didn't help that it was brought out during the woke era, where we had Reva, which took the place of what could have been a more interesting character. It didn't work as well as it should, but it was still a successful project in my mind. So, with that said, a lot of people were vehemently opposed to this movie for some reason. The vitriol I've seen against this film, sight unseen, is almost unexplainable. I mean, it's people are just viciously against this film, and I don't understand it, because they're not against the film per se, they're against the concept of this film, that it's going to be a flop long before it came out, long before anybody had seen it, including they themselves, who are pronouncing it DOA once it gets into theaters, which, by the way, as of now, being roughly a week into its showing, it's doing very well. It pretty much made its money back. And, before we got all the armchair pundits going, it needs to make another $75 bajillion before it makes a profit. You don't know that. I don't know that. The fact remains that as long as it made its original investment, it's pretty much in safe hands. It pretty much did what they wanted it to do. They weren't expecting this one to be a $1 billion blockbuster. It was basically a soft opening to try to get Star Wars back on the big screen. And on that score, I think it succeeds. Now, again, we'll get into the story here, and we'll get some spoilers along the way. But first, before spoilers, I'll just give a quick rating to this. I would give it for what it is, and all it really needs to be is a Mandalorian and Grogu movie. It needs to be, did they do right by Mandalorian and Grogu? I say they did. They made it very compelling. Actually, this film is better than I expected, because I went in there with the lowest of expectations. Because Mandalorian, the show, I enjoyed it while I watched it, but like most Star Wars content that isn't the PT and the OT, it's basically disposable entertainment. You see it, you enjoy it, you honestly will forget about it in about 3 days. This movie is no different. It's good, it's quality. But again, if you're going into it, as a lot of people seem to think, that every Star Wars movie has to be a 5-star, on level with The Empire Strikes Back, life-changing experience, then no, you should just wait for streaming, and you'll save yourself a lot of heartache and regret that you went to see this. If you want to see the sights and sounds of Star Wars again on the big screen, you want actually a very engaging storyline, and you know some great. The score was great. The great special effects. If you want that experience, there's no better way to see it than on the big screen. So I would recommend it. For what it is, I'm going to give it 4 stars because it's not a life-changing experience, but I was never bored by it. I was never insulted by it. I was never put off by anything in it. Now, there were some things that could have been better. There were some things that were extremely good. But again, it's a solid 4. It's a B plus. It's maybe an 8 out of 10 for what it is. And again, that's what the problem is, I think, with a lot of film criticism these days, is people are predisposed to judge a movie on what they wanted it to be more than how it really was. I think that was a problem, particularly with the prequels. Everybody had this idea of what they wanted the prequel trilogy to be, and so it paled to their headcanon. And in the same way here, if you're going into it thinking it's going to be a, steak dinner, you have to understand the plan was that this was a burger and fries movie. This was not supposed to be a 5-course meal. This was supposed to be a burger and fries and a shake, and you had your fun. The kids had fun, and you had a good time, and you move on with your day. So again, on that score, I think it was very successful. Now, talking about the movie at large, it basically picks up. They have a lot of sort of Easter eggs and stuff in it. We see Mando gets his ship back, and it's doing sort of the Star Trek 4 thing, where it's like he gets a new ship that looks exactly like the old one, which was cool, which was neat, because the original version of that had been destroyed. And the Mandalorian is still doing what the Mandalorian does. He's going out there, and now that he's working for the Republic, he's taking out splinter cells of Imperials that are still like warlords taking over a small part of the system that they were originally in charge of. And so Mando goes in, takes these guys out, dead or alive. Again, there was a lot of action, a lot of killing in this, Star Wars style, of course, not nothing graphic, but I was surprised at the level of action. I mean, they got the Mandalorian basically taking on platoons of soldiers without even getting a scratch, and of course Grogu with him all the time. And a lot of people, I think, sort of, because again, we're going to get into the fan criticisms of this. As much as this is a movie review, this is basically confronting the fan criticisms, which is most fans, I'm not broad brushing, of course, present company excluded, because I don't share this view, but many of the fans don't like the cutesy elements of Star Wars. They don't like the Ewoks. They don't like the Jar Jars. They don't like the 3PO in some cases. I mean, a lot of it is that kind of whimsy that they don't like. And so with Baby Yoda, you hear a lot of criticism that, well, they should have wrapped up his story at the end of the 2nd season. I disagree with that vehemently, because honestly, what The Mandalorian was basically trying to take Boba Fett and do him semi-heroically, as heroically as like a Western gunslinger could. And I think without Grogu, it really just becomes a one-note character, which is Boba Fett. You might as well just take the edge off him of, having a conscience, so to speak, and just not working for the Republic and have him just continue to work for gang lords, and you would have Boba Fett. So I think that it was a necessary step to keep Grogu. Now, of course, fans responded well to Grogu, Baby Yoda, and toys were sold and kids liked it, and that was a no-brainer to keep him in it. But I don't think that that was a negative. I think that if anything, that was a plus. So the first half, of course, we get a lot of action. We see an assault on an AT-AT. I'm not going to call them an AT-AT. And again, it's seeing the sights and sounds of Star Wars on the big screen. There's just nothing like it. And the story, as I said, it might not be ambitious. It's not. It's what I'd call a small stakes story, but we do get a very intricate plot, which deals with, of course, we've got some other characters such as Zeb from Rebels. It was nice to see him realized here. And I think one of the things about putting him in this movie, it was important because with the Ahsoka show, and we've seen Sabine, we've seen I'm forgetting that kid's name. I got his face right in front of me. But we've seen these characters, Hera, but we haven't seen Zeb that much because he's a complete CGI character. And the only way they were really going to do him and do him justice was to put him in this movie. So it's sort of justifiable to have the movie version of this just to give him something to do, because Ahsoka season 2 is supposedly coming out, and I think we've got the barest glimpse of him in the first season. So again, the idea of doing a movie version, it kind of is a good idea for some of these things. Another thing we got was Sigourney Weaver playing his boss, his contact at the well, it's not the Rebellion anymore, right? It's the New Republic at the Alliance headquarters. And again, if you're going to see her, she's basically in 3 scenes, I think. She does a good job. I mean, I don't really get the sense that she's phoning it in, but again, nothing much is required of her. And Mando goes off on missions to bring in these Imperial warlords. And in this film, the main objective is to find Rada the Hutt, the son of Jabba the Hutt. And as we've seen, I think it was in Book of Boba Fett, the twins, which I guess are Jabba's brother and sister, who are twins, who are pretty much taking over his enterprise. Again, that was a part of Book of Boba Fett where Boba kind of took over the Tatooine portion of Jabba's business, but they're still, ruling the Empire from Nal Hutta. And they want Mandalorian to find Rada, who is supposedly missing and captured, and eventually it come to find out, Mando goes on this sort of film noir adventure, and I could sense very easily that this felt like a film that George Lucas would approve of, because if you liked the Obi-Wan scenes in Attack of the Clones, the whole first half of this film basically does that with the Mandalorian. He comes in contact with the spider monkey alien. Again, I'm just going to be throwing out various generic terms for these characters, but the spider monkey character that was in Solo, well, there's a version of that character here played by Martin Scorsese, which he was good. I mean, I don't know that they really needed him to play the character. Any kind of actor with a Brooklyn accent probably could have done it, but very funny character, and that was a fun scene, a couple of scenes where he goes to him as an informant. Again, it's just, it's like the first half is film noirish. It sort of blends into the second half, which is sci-fi pulp fantasy. And again, those are all things that I think George Lucas used in one way or another during the Star Wars saga, and it feels like they are using his playbook here. This feels very much like something Lucas would approve of, if not, completely right himself, because, with other things that we were, that we had foisted upon us. I mean, who could say The Acolyte felt like Star Wars? No. Who could say the sequel trilogy felt like Star Wars? No. Who could say, we could run down a list of all the things that Disney has done so far, and none of them particularly felt like Star Wars. But this does feel like it's very much in keeping with George Lucas' vision. We have a lot of things playing on themes that were in the saga, such as Mandalorian is the father figure for Grogu, and what it means to be a good father. And we have that juxtaposition with Rada the Hutt, who wants to distance himself from Jabba's legacy. He doesn't want to be known as the son of Jabba. He wants to make his own name for himself. And so when they finally find him, he's a prisoner of a gladiatorial kind of what would you call that, like arena, and he doesn't really want to leave because he wants to use this position to get himself to fame and fortune. And of course, Jang, I almost said Boba and Jango, the Mandalorian has to go in and of course try to rescue him, which he gets in the arena, which is a great scene. It's very manic, and there's like all kinds of action here where it's basically modeled after the chessboard scene in A New Hope, with some of the same creatures and the floor pattern being the same, which was very interesting. And again, you get a lot of like gangster style stuff. Like they escape that, and it turns into like a bit of a like King Kong. Everybody's all these creatures are breaking into the city streets, and it leads to a high-speed chase. There's a lot of fights in bars and in the gangsters' homestead, so to speak. So again, the first half does feel, I think, the most compelling, which is very noir-like Star Wars. And again, it felt very much to me like Attack of the Clones. The second half, and again, this will be something that people complain about or have mentioned, that it feels like maybe 4 episodes stitched together. Now, I wouldn't argue against that. It does feel like that to me. I do feel like they put some emphasis on certain things, though. I think they seriously upped the budget for a lot of these set pieces to make sure that, it felt like you were getting your money's worth. But, as I said, with like Zeb and we get to see the Hutt home world and so forth, it feels like they spent the money. It wasn't like they just took the episodes and stitched them together, which is kind of a cheap effect. But they did actually put some effort into this to make it a film. Now, the second half, and there's a sizable shift there where it becomes a second half. So in a way, it feels like you really could have just done 2-hour films or so to you could have done the first hour of this film, and then you could have left a cliffhanger and just did the other half as a sequel. I don't think they're going to beat those allegations. That's kind of what it feels like. But the second half deals with Mando being captured by another bounty hunter. I'm told that this bounty hunter, who looks familiar, was in, I don't know, another show. It might have been Clone Wars, might have been Rebels. I don't remember. What's his name? Embu? I'm not sure. But he goes to capture Mando, and it's up to Grogu and the Babu Frick people, which that's what I'm going to call them because I don't know what they are, what they're really named. But those guys are hilarious. And having Grogu on his own mission was a good idea. A lot of people complain that this portion of the film is a little too long, but I remember the criticism of the Kenobi show where people were saying, well, why does little Leia have to fix the door? And because you have to give the characters something to do. You don't ever want one of the characters, particularly a main character, and in this case, Grogu's name is in the title, you don't want to have him sitting on the sidelines and doing nothing. He has to do something proactive. So at a certain point, uh, the Hutts have captured Mando, and they remove the mask. Which, if you've seen the show, that's a big no-no for a Mandalorian. They're not allowed to take the mask off in front of anybody. And the purpose of this to me really was only to prove that Pedro Pascal was in the movie, because basically he just does voiceover work. I think besides maybe the first season, for the most part, he isn't really in the costume because Pedro became a big actor. At the time, he was just an up and comer, and of course, he's doing about 15 movies a year now. So at this point, he doesn't have time to be in the costume for just walking around and so forth. So the only time he's on set is when the mask is going to come off. I think I can't remember the actor's name or the stunt person's name, but I think he is the grandson of John Wayne, which is, an interesting tie. But so he's fed to a basically can be described as a giant white snake, and it's a very exciting sequence. It feels like, again, this is the pulpy Return of the Jedi feel, where there's a monster in the pit that the hero has to face, and a lot of creatures, a lot of strange beasties in this. I imagine that's the reason why the film got a PG-13 rating, because despite the violence being really cartoony, a lot of these creatures probably would be scarier for, I don't know, maybe under 8 or so. And so once Mando fights his way out of that and he gets his helmet back, he's been poisoned by this, white river snake or whatever it is, this huge monster. And it's up to a baby Grogu to nurse him back to health. And so, again, the film takes its time for a good 15, 20 minutes maybe of him building a shelter for Mando and tending to him and stealing food from this alien fisherman. And they kind of did that thing there. That was the only concern I had, really. One of the concerns I had was I didn't want them to use these force powers that started in other parts of Star Wars, like The Last Jedi or whatever, where you can use the Force to heal people. And they got to the point where they kind of like had Baby Yoda try to do that a little bit to Mandalorian, but it really didn't cure the poison. So I'm glad they didn't go all the way with that. So he has to get the antidote from this fisherman guy. So again, that kind of allayed my fears. Another thing I wasn't sure of is I didn't really know that I would feel all right with Rod of the Hutt speaking basic most of the time. And I think it fit in with what they were trying to do, that he didn't want to be his father's son. And the twins speak Huttese, but he didn't really speak Huttese all that much. But it kind of worked. It kind of fit into what they were trying to do. So I didn't have a problem with that either. So basically, the Mandalorian finally recovers, and they had those. I don't think I've ever heard the term actually pronounced, for real, but Amandamans. That was a character. I had the action figure when I was a kid. It was like a yellow action figure with long arms, and he stands in the back of Jabba's palace for like one scene when Han and Luke are being brought before Jabba. I don't know why they repurposed them as sort of like just monsters. I thought that was like a sentient race, but they kind of make them a sort of like, shark creatures in the water or something. And so they face some of those. So Mando basically puts the question before Grogu whether they should escape or they should face the Hutts, because they're probably not going to have any peace because the Hutts still have enough sway in the galaxy to make their lives difficult. So Mando and Grogu decide to go back and sort of finish all family business. And that means taking out the Hutts, which, of course, in Mando's, worldview, they should die because they saw his face. And, that ends up happening. They also go back because Rada is captured. And I guess the idea was that, they've kind of endeared themselves to him at this point. He's sort of a big pushover, and he becomes friends with, Grogu. So it's that's kind of, I think, the reason why they decided to go back, and more so than anything else. But and again, it leads to a lot of action and a big assault on the Hutt's compound, and they have like repurposed battle droids there that are like defending the place, because Hutts are not great at combat. But it was fun to see. It's like, what does this film offer you? It basically, if you ever wanted to see a Hutt fight, if you wanted to see a buff Hutt, this is the only place you're probably going to get that. I don't really know how many more movies are going to focus on Hutts and have them competent fighters, But again, we get a lot of action. We get to see Mando employ all the stuff that a Mandalorian is known for, I guess. The flamethrower, the grappling hook gun or whatever, and the jetpack and different things. And it feels like, a lot of stuff that I wish Django had used actually gets used in this one. I still say that Django kind of got taken out like a punk in Attack of the Clones. But yeah, so basically the Hutts end up getting their just desserts for their treachery, because they wanted to kill Rada, and it was right for Mando to not turn in Rada. And eventually Sigourney Weaver comes in with the ex-pilots, and they bomb the place. And of course, we get the Dave Filoni we get the Dave Filoni cameo. He gets two cameos. They're brief, but one of them is with the hat, the cowboy hat, and everybody kind of makes fun of that because it's a cowboy hat in Star Wars. Well, why not? And one of the other pilots, the Asian guy, he looked familiar. He was from the show, from The Mandalorian. He gets his cameo. But again, it's and then the story over. Rada goes his own way, and it's just like I said, it's just a fun bit of business. It's it's exciting to see on the big screen. It's got its charm because, like I said, it does have its. I mean, this feels like Star Wars. Did Andor feel like Star Wars? Come on, let's be honest. No, it didn't. So, I mean, if I had my choice of what was I going to watch on a Saturday night, do I want to watch 4 episodes of Andor, or do I want to see this movie? It's going to be this movie every time, because it feels true to the spirit of Star Wars. And that's what I think people liked about this show from the beginning, The Mandalorian, was that it did feel like a reasonably accurate outgrowth of the original trilogy. I mean, this takes place after Return of the Jedi. And the next Star Wars film that's coming out next year is Starfighter, which I think is set in the Rey timeline, at that era. And that's the one that's going to be challenging for people. Do they really want to go see more in the Rey, Finn, Poe era, the sequel trilogy era, or are you satisfied being confined to the period after Return of the Jedi? Now, in closing, again, I just feel like there are more people that, just they like the idea of Star Wars, but they just don't like Star Wars. To explain that, I feel like there's never going to be anything as good for these people as The Empire Strikes Back and Andor. And it's like, that was not the mission statement of Star Wars. Lucas made it for the young and for the young at heart. And that's what this film, I think, really encompasses. Now, every Star Wars film, Disney film, should be approached on its own merits. I am not going to just reject this one outright because it's got Disney in the title. It's got, Dave Filoni behind it and Jon Favreau. At one point, people were saying that they were going to be the saviors of Star Wars. Now people are just sort of crying foul with them as well. But anyway, as I said, you're going to get out of Star Wars what you want. If you're never going to be satisfied with anything but the complete absence of anything cute and whimsical, Star Wars really isn't for you. It really shouldn't be something that you call yourself a fan of. Because this, again, with this is basically boiled down to its essence. This is the pulpy Saturday afternoon serials with, some film noir, some sci-fi fantasy, all mixed into one. And, barring any kind of samurai slash, Jedi influences, which this film doesn't really have much of. I mean, Grogu sort of has his uh, force powers, but again, this is basically distilled down. It's just the fun Flash Gordon type adventure that you want to see, mixed with a little, Blade Runner esque, going after gangsters and stuff. I mean, it's basically very Lucas-ish, very Lucas-ish. And I think part of the reason why it is that I do think Filoni and Favreau, to an extent, is also an acolyte of Lucas, that they kind of see, and they're not, their approaches are not without some drawbacks, but I do feel like they have a better chance of steering this, great fantasy vehicle of ours in the right direction, more so than anyone else. So, I mean, it's worth giving them a chance to do so. Because, I mean, to me, I would like to see more Star Wars. I would personally like to see them explore the Return of the Jedi era more, whether that means recasting the original trilogy characters or using the deep fake CGI. I personally would go with the latter. I know people, there are fans of both and there are detractors of both. I don't think you're ever going to make everybody happy when one is chosen over the other. A lot of people also are just scared. I remember saying on Twitter, that's the way they should go next. And people are scared. They're going to ruin it. I don't think they'll ruin it so long as, we have the right people in charge now that Kathleen Kennedy is finally, fortunately, no longer running the show. So again, I feel like everyone should just give The Mandalorian and Grogu a chance. A lot of people, myself included, weren't expecting much of it, but it did deliver what it promised. It did deliver just a fun Star Wars adventure. And again, it's not on par with Empire Strikes Back or Return of the Jedi or basically any Lucas created Star Wars movie, but it doesn't really need to be. We don't really need to justify a Star Wars movie. People seem to think that there needs to be a life-altering experience with these Star Wars movies. The truth is, though, that there were only a finite number of those that could be created, and George Lucas did them all. The only thing that really the Disney could have done was give us a good sequel trilogy showing us the aged Han, Luke, and Leia. And they muffed it. They just didn't follow through on that promise. And so there really is nothing left to do now unless you give them the keys to do the OT characters again, to bring back Han, Luke, Leia, Lando, Chewie, the droids, and try to do a post Return of the Jedi film. That would be the way to go. I see it. But again, a lot of them in Lucasfilm are scared because of what happened with Solo. And, depending on who's behind it, it could be a disaster. But again, it's better to take swings. It's better to take huge swings than to just be continually mired in, the adequate, the it's good enough, which is basically what we've gotten. The most we've gotten from Disney is it's good enough. And they really should try to be a little more adventurous, try to swing for the fences a little bit more. But if they will, it remains to be seen. But again, give this a shot. There's a lot of funny moments in this too. We really even talk about the funny moments, but there's a lot of comedy out of Grogu. He's a baby, and that he's trying to get him to start the ship or whatever, and he's like firing missiles by accident because he doesn't know how to start the ship because he's a baby. And he's like tapping him on the helmet because the thermal detonators are in the AT-ATs, and he's trying to get Mandalorian's attention. It's just fun stuff. They have him, Grogu, actually suiting up like Rambo style, and that was hilarious. And again, the Babu Frick characters. I mean, that was one of the highlights of Rise of Skywalker, and it was fun that they brought them back. En masse. They had like I think at least four of them, and a lot of jokes there. I won't get into all those, but there was a lot of funny lines and scenarios that had to do with them as well. So again, I'm gonna recommend this one, and if you like fun, if you don't go in there with a chip on your shoulder, expecting to hate it, expecting it to be, like I said, a religious experience, you're gonna like it. You're gonna enjoy it. If you like Star Wars at all, I think you definitely will enjoy it. So let me know what you think in the comments below. What did you think of The Mandalorian and Grogu? Did you enjoy it? Do you want to see more of these characters, either on the big screen or maybe in another season? I'm pretty sure that they're still going to work on another season. I don't know if they're getting another movie, but I'm pretty sure a season 4 is still in the works. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And to recap, I would give this, like I said, maybe 4 stars out of 5. Enjoyed it. A lot of action, a lot of funny stuff. I felt like it was in keeping with Lucas Star Wars. And, I wasn't bored. I mean, it might have been a little long. I mean, yeah, you could have maybe cut like 10 minutes out of it, I guess. But it really doesn't overstay its welcome. They give you a competent story that, a lot of people are saying, well, why didn't Baby Yoda do this? Or why didn't Baby Yoda do that? Well, he's a baby. You know what I mean? They kind of got the out there. I think a lot of people also wanted to be more ambitious, like, let's hear Grogu's first words. No, you don't want to do that. There's sort of a thing where when you kill the sameness of a, popular franchise or something, when you kill the sameness of it and you make, advances in the storyline or advances with the character, you can never go back. So when the time is right, and I think they feel like this is wrapping up this whole Mandalorian arc, era, storyline, whatever you want to say, when it's ready to wrap up, that's when we should get some concrete, final, final end game scenarios. I don't think you do that now, not knowing if you want to carry this on for another 5, 6, 7 years. They have Baby Grogu talk now. You pretty much you've aged him up to where you can't really play the Baby Yoda game anymore. And I would rather, and I think a lot of people would rather see that character stay like that. So I don't know why people are acting like they want to be done with that so soon. But yeah, it's a B plus, maybe an A minus. I mean, I'll have to see it again. I mean, it's not the kind of film where I think I would rush out and see again on the big screen. But having seen it once on the big screen, like I said, that's the best way to experience it. And I guess an 8 out of 10, maybe, if you're going on a 10-point scale. Because I did enjoy myself. I probably will buy this on DVD. Definitely going to see it again. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Did you enjoy the film? What do you want to see in the future for The Mandalorian? And until next we meet, this is Johnnie Torch reminding you once again, keep the flame burning brightly, and may the Force be with you.